This episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast is brought to you by Viking Group. For more than 100 years, Viking's fire protection products have protected property and lives worldwide from the devastating effects of fire. With an industry-leading lineup, supported by groundbreaking digital tools, and available 24/7 at supplynet.com, it's no wonder that Viking is trusted above all.
Subscribe.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. It's been a long time coming, but we are finally here in the new Viking manufacturing and testing facility in Caledonia, Michigan. James Golinveaux, how's it going today?
It's going very well, very well. I'm excited. I think we've been trying to plan this for 3 years. You and I getting together. So
I think we started talking during the construction of this place about getting when you guys finally get it all ramped up.
Right.
And then I think it was like a month after COVID is when you guys finished construction, either right before or right after.
we finished it just in time to shut it down.
That's great timing for everything. But it turned out great. This was the first international, being Canadian, this is the first international stop that I made when they ordered the borders back up. When I was able to cross the border, the first place I came was here. You weren't here. I think I came on a Saturday. So that makes sense. They somehow left open the back door and I snuck my way through. I met with a couple people inside and talked about your virtual sprinkler, your virtual valve room is what I like to call it.
Right.
We talked about a couple other things, and now finally we can get you on the podcast and we can talk sprinkler.
Yeah, the virtual, it's an interesting story on the virtual. It was a result of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We found ourselves with a great facility and no ability to share it.
Right.
So what do? You've got to go create the virtual reality. And we hired teams of people to come in. We already had them because we knew it was going to be part of the future of training.
Yep.
But we didn't know how fast we could do it and how fast we had to become a news agency.
Right.
We have a complete green room for broadcasting, and it's great to do the Teams environment. But as you do with the podcast, it's a more professional type of a presentation. So we wanted to be that right away. And, COVID is a bad thing, but it created opportunities for us to accelerate some of our ideas.
It was a huge bump in my viewership as well when COVID happened, and this was kind of like the way that people could still talk sprinkler without being in person to talk sprinkler. So I benefited. As bad as that sounds to say, I benefited from COVID greatly in regards to this.
A lot of lessons from people. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. So,
that's right. Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people did get very sick from it. But the people that did, look at the opportunities, benefited from it.
And evolved. Like I've said 1,000 times on this podcast, you either evolve with the industry or the industry is going to evolve without you. The people that immediately jumped onto how do we take advantage of the digital aspects of this industry that we can do? They looked more, I think that was the push for remote inspection, right? That was kind of the opportunity. Everybody took the opportunity to really dive into remote inspections as well.
And how do you train for that? Because it's already remote, so it's got to be digital. So you got to be digital savvy, and the way it was done before is you rode in the truck with someone.
Yeah.
And you rode with them for 2 years and you got enough experience under your belt. And then the first time you go out and do your own, now you're doing it via computer and software and looking at data. A lot different.
I'm still a hands-on guy. I like to be able to go. I like to be able to look at the gauge, touch the gauge, look at the back of the valve, make sure that nothing's going on. I know a little bit about the virtual inspections, but I'm an in-person. Let's spin some valves. Let's blow some water.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yep.
And when it's 2:00 in the morning, and you're out on a job site and you're staring at a dry valve, you better have a little bit of hands-on experience, because you're going to be there at 7:00 in the morning still talking to that dry valve.
Right.
If you don't have some hands-on. So
super glad I'm not the only one that talks to valves.
Well, we program all dry valves to operate at 2 a.m. It's just a thing we do before they leave the factory. I try to explain that to people about a hot day and a cold night and, clogged orifice in accelerators, trip the dry valves always around 2 a.m.
Yeah, it never happens during the day.
Yeah, never during the day when working hours. It's always at night. So.
Never straight time service calls. So this this room that we're standing in right now, like I say, this is one of, you have multiple rooms similar to this, but this is Disney for fitters. Everything here, all the underground, all your water supply is run underground, and it's all contained within the property itself?
Correct. I'm a big fan of action and reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I could train you on a deluge valve,
Right.
but it has to have the detector.
Right.
It has to have the panel.
Yeah.
I could train you on this valve all day long. You can go out in the field and all of a sudden it's wired to a panel that has detectors. Next thing you know, you're talking to the fire department.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know what the shutdown procedure was. You didn't know to test it. You may have to activate a detector.
Yep.
So all of this is live.
Yep.
So it recirculates the water. We have an 80,000 gallon reservoir.
Wow.
And all the water used goes back to a reservoir. It's treated, filtered, and reused in the facility.
Is filtered sprinkler water an oxymoron?
We get pool filters all over the place.
Okay, all right.
So we know it's going through piping, and just for the sanity of everyone.
Sure. Yeah. You can only give out so many free shirts for guys working
Exactly. Exactly.
I get it. Yeah, that's cool. So before we were talking a little bit here, and we can go through it and we can kind of walk around and talk.
Yeah, it's my favorite way to describe this room.
Yeah, you start on this side of the valve room here. You start on this side of the valve room, and I'll do a quick pan of everything.
So I describe it as your fear of water.
Right.
And how much are you willing to pay for your fear of water?
Right.
So the simple check valve, riser control station, or a simple check valve with a flow switch.
Yep.
About the easiest way to control water. Not a whole bunch of mechanical things in the way.
Yep.
But water is charged in the system and it's ready to go right behind the sprinklers. You have no fear of water. You want the protection scheme.
Yes.
Then you start moving along. You get your alarm devices. You get your dry valves because of fear of freezing of the water. And you move your way all the way around the room, as you can see. And the valve stations are getting more expensive as you go for the fear of water, all the way to double interlock pre-action systems, where the last thing you want is, you have a fire, is you're trying to hold back that water for as long as possible just to double confirm that you have a fire event.
Right.
And now I'm going to send water.
Yeah.
So from the cheapest, from a single check valve, to the most expensive, at the end of the day, they all discharge water.
Yeah.
They all do the same thing.
That's right.
It's just how we get there and how many steps do we have to get there.
Yeah. And it's an amazing program. Now, when you guys were designing this, did you guys take education into consideration, or did you guys have sprinkler designers lay this room out as far as this is what we want to have, this is what we want to work, etc.?
A combination of everything. So, we consulted with people that already were doing training.
Yep.
So, we had James Lake come over from an association. We borrowed him permanently. He's got his master's in teaching. So he kind of knows the environment of teaching and what students and how they learn. So a lot of visual, a lot of hands-on experience here in the way he laid it out, the lighting of the room, the feel of the room, the hands-on of the tables.
There's tools everywhere.
Because you can have a valve over here, and I can describe how this diaphragm is going to move to you all day long. You may get it because of your experience, but if I can take a valve and show you that diaphragm moving and what has to happen, what you're going to have is you're going to have a visual to it. Yeah, it's a Viking valve. But there's a lot of competitors' valves that have very similar concepts. So
what makes it a Viking valve? Right?
Viking valve, it's, for us, it's where it's cast, where our sourcing is. We have a great Buy American thing going on.
Yep.
Because we still cast valves in Ohio.
Right.
Which was amazing to me. I was amazed when I came to Viking to find out we have a Buy American strategy. But when you teach, once I explain a mechanical drive valve, an air over water ratio valve to you,
Right.
it doesn't matter who's you're standing in front of, you understand the concept. Now, how you reset it, whether you need a tool,
Yep.
whether you got to take the faceplate off or a plunger,
Yep.
all of that's a variable. But once you get the concept down, that's what we want to do. We want to get the concept to people that I understand deluge, I understand dry, I understand the service requirements.
Right.
So this is a demo,
Yep.
but you got to take into consideration your audience.
Yeah.
So one day I may have designers in here. What do they need to know? They need to know, how does this all stack up? What does it look like?
Yep.
How can I put it in a corner? What are the functions to it? Field, they're going to go, how do I set it?
How do I reset it?
How do I reset
trip
it?
Yeah.
How do I service it?
Yep.
Insurance, they're going to be looking at it and going, what do I need to look at to make sure it's all functional? What are these gauges supposed to represent that I know it's on?
Yep.
Because I could bring in 5 out of 10 people off the street. I doubt that most of them are going to know whether it's active or not. So there's different features that Jim wanted to explain, but you got to imagine you got 20 people standing around.
Sure.
So we break up classes.
Yep.
So some will go to the virtual lab, some will come in here.
Mm-hmm.
Never have too many people,
Right.
because you'll get 5 in the back on their phone.
Yep.
You'll get the 10 in the middle that are just paying attention, and you'll get the 5 that are interactive.
Yeah. The guys that are learning, the guys that are there for the credit, and then the guys that are there because they drove.
And they exist everywhere. You just
Yep.
got to know that they're there, and how do I get them engaged?
Yeah. It's an amazing concept. Like, from the designer side of me, I come in knowing how these valves work, how they're sized, things like that. But if you get a guy who looks at it like a data sheet, and sure, you can see the measurements, but to actually see this is here, this is accessible, how do I get to the various components of the system? It's mind blowing. And everything from Viking is kind of in this Ohio, Michigan area. Your other facility is still in Michigan.
It's
about
in
an hour
Hastings.
away. Hastings, Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
not even an hour away. Was that kind of the idea, to keep everything in that sort of North Midwest region?
Well, I you know my background. So I'm 41 years in the business this May. So I just celebrated my 41st year.
Yep.
And I've worked for a contractor for 10 years. Then I came to Central Sprinkler.
Yep.
Central was acquired by Tyco, so I had 24 years with the Tyco JCI environment.
Yep.
And when I came here, the first thing I knew was I got to build a world-class training and R&D center.
Right.
That's what this building was based on. It wasn't based on a new corporate office and I need a bigger office or something like that. But I needed an experience for customers, insurance companies, engineering firms, that when they came here, they knew they were visiting something different.
Yeah.
So the idea for the building went forward, but trying to go exactly where I was going with the story. I could build it anywhere in the U.S. There was a lot of states offering me incentives to go to Texas, to go to Carolinas, to go to different places, because they want the businesses to move.
Right.
They didn't build this business. You know who built the business? The people in Hastings.
Right.
The people that have worked for this company for 100 years.
Yep.
In multi-generation. They built this business. So I built this facility within 20 miles of the original location to keep the people.
Well, and that's good, because I mean, the rumors, and not the rumors, but several years ago, another manufacturer, I think I can mention the name because they're not around anymore, was acquired by another. Globe was acquired by another manufacturer. And the worst news that I had ever heard was that they shut down that facility in Standish.
Right.
I believe it was the second largest employer of the town, aside from the jail. And it was devastating to me. I had visited that facility a couple times, and it was never an actual vision or memory that I had, but the memory and the feel that I had of that facility was like, old lady on a porch with a blanket over her assembling a dry valve, right? Like, you know what I mean? That wasn't, I never saw that, but that was the feel that you got there. It was like a hometown kind of manufacturer, right? And so it's good that you're keeping that kind of relationship.
I wanted to support the people.
Yeah.
Because me coming in as a new CEO, I had no track record with the company, and I don't deserve to move it just based on where I want to live.
Yep.
I wanted to keep them, and we did really well. The retention rate was I think we lost 2 or 3 people that didn't want to drive, and we made them whole even by the drive, knowing that they were going to drive 20 miles further.
20 miles.
20 miles. That was as far as those who know this area, Grand Rapids and Michigan, labor utilization and labor availability, having these 2 plants 20 miles apart gives us more labor resources that we have for both of our plants.
Okay. So why don't we go for a little tour here and let's check out the rest of the facility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so we're here in the lobby, which is not a little lobby. This is a monster facility, and we're going to do a little tour of the main hallway, the main corridor.
Right. We're going to start off in the training center. So when you first enter the building, when you make a right-hand turn, 24,000 square feet of just training dedicated to the training experience.
24,000 square feet of just training.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll take you.
Let's go.
Take you in. The students will come in. They'll register at the desk, and depending on what experience that they want, we modify the programs. We have the riser room.
Yep. This is where we kicked off things.
Fully interactive, fully engaged. Everything's with detectors, with electrical, all recirculated water. We have our traditional PowerPoint room, and this is interesting.
Okay.
When we set this up, we had consultants, obviously, on furniture, packages, and training environment.
Right.
And my funny story is I told the architect that I wanted an amphitheater. It was the last time I built a training facility, I had an amphitheater.
Right.
And he just looked at me with blank eyes and said, "How old are you?" I was like, "Really? You're going to offend me?"
Yeah.
How
much are we paying you right now?
He says, "Nobody wants to learn in that environment anymore. And it's just not the state of the art."
Okay.
Throwing PowerPoint at people is not the way you want to do it. If I throw 300 PowerPoints at you in 8 hours, they say you have about an 8 to a 10% retention factor of what you're looking at, because you go PowerPoint numb. And we all know the phrase.
It exists, yeah.
So he said, "I'll show you this room over here. In today's environment, today's students, and the attention span and what they want to learn and how they want to learn is in smaller groups."
Yep.
Where we'll break people out into different modules, but in a smaller group with 4 or 5 people, they're assigned a task.
Okay.
And when they're assigned the task, they have to work on a solution. The moderator is in the room, but the 4 or 5 people are working on their own solution.
Right.
First thing you don't do is you don't sit on your cell phone.
Yeah.
Because the other 3 are saying, "We're doing all the work."
Yeah.
So your peers sort of keep you in line to do the work that's assigned to you. The last thing you do is the moderator will pick one of you to present your findings.
The moderator picks. Oh, okay.
So now you have the fear of, I may be selected, I better pay attention. Your retention rate goes to 68% inside that room.
Wow.
Just because of the environment and the way you're being trained versus a typical PowerPoint presentation.
Which room gets used more? Is it this one just because of the comfort level?
You have to start there. You always have to start there.
Yep.
You do your safety training. Here's the exits. Here's your welcome to Viking.
Right.
And when we've got to go through a series of, here's a standard response upright, here's a pendant, we'll do it in there.
Sure. Yep.
But when we really want to get engaged with the students, they come into this environment. So we had some really good consultants that worked with Jim Lake, gave us a good training environment. Now, a room over here, as you can see, is a result of COVID. We have a broadcast studio.
Yep.
Which is pretty state of the art. It was timely that we had opened up the facility to shut it down for COVID because we had the bandwidth to broadcast. We would not have had the bandwidth before to do this live broadcast, but with the green screen, they put different backgrounds just to tease me.
Anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
Coming to you live from a beach in Hawaii.
But we do interviews. We can talk about technology, talk about new products.
Yep.
We can do internal training.
Yep.
It's a great environment.
Yeah, I'm going to cut to my studio right now. Big difference.
So the experience of the student, I went 10 years in the industry and I never saw a sprinkler activate.
Okay.
I had designed thousands of sprinklers into buildings.
Right.
And I never saw a sprinkler activate. The only thing I knew was the flow charts that the manufacturers put on.
Right.
And then I found out that those were just averages. Those weren't the actual flow charts.
Well, I had a conversation with Hasudoshi a while ago about the development of the hydraulic, the curve, the design curve. And it was based off the average pipe schedule.
Yeah.
It was not for light hazard.
There was no science.
There was not like it takes 0.1 gallons a minute over 1,500 square feet. It was just, this is how much water we get out of our pipe schedule design.
Correct.
And that blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind.
Right.
Now, you guys have the capability, not necessarily in this room here, but you guys have the capability in other manufacturers, and everybody has the capability to say, we're doing plastic storage, Group A plastics encapsulated to 25 feet. Mm-hmm. How much water do I actually need?
And what am I doing it with? I'm going to show you a couple things in this hydraulic lab.
Yep.
So I could take the same amount of water out of a K5.6.
Yep.
And completely change the results with the same amount of water out of a K25.
Right.
And people don't understand that.
Right.
They're saying water's water, density's density, because that's what I was taught. That's what the area density curves were.
Right.
So I worked for 20 years with NFPA 13 to get rid of those curves.
Water's water.
And the first time I submitted it was 2002 edition of NFPA 13. It was the first time that I had submitted eliminate the area density curves. FM had done it 10 years prior.
Right. So you in 2012 is when you wanted to make the just single point. 2002, you made it. So yeah, there wasn't a 2012 edition. You wanted to make that single point.
I wanted to get rid of the density curves because they were pipe schedule systems.
Right.
And I had data that actually showed as you went up the curve and you actually tested for those design points, I had data that showed that it was not I don't want to say bad fire. I'll never say bad fire protection.
Right.
It wasn't adequate to what we could do.
Right.
And the bottom of the curves were a better protection point.
Okay.
And that was the strongest water delivery was the bottom of the curve.
Right.
So the first submittal was just pick the bottom of the curve and move on. Eliminate this sliding up the curve and all the tricky math. You go out to a riser data plate and it's a mess.
Yeah.
You know, there's 13 variables of credits and penalties that you took with temperature and everything else. And you're looking at a riser data plate and how did they come up with 0.285 over 2,750 square feet? You're like, I don't know.
Yeah. I've never understood the benefit of riding that curve up to 3,000 square feet for a design density for any of the ordinary hazard available pressures.
It really was pressure.
Okay.
So if you had a ordinary or the early stages of storage where they went up to 3,000 square feet, and what tools did you have back then? You had a K5.6 and a K8.
Yep.
Okay, the ELO up through 1978 through 1994, only ELO was large stroke.
Right.
And that had its own pressure criteria. It was a high pressure storage sprinkler. Otherwise, you were restricted to the K5.6 or the K8. Now, try to get a 0.6 out of a K8. It's tough. So then we started putting sprinklers closer together.
Yep.
Because that's the way you control pressure.
Yep.
Sprinkler doesn't know better. It still
it's going to
throws
put out the
same
water
pattern.
that gives it. Yeah, exactly.
But we felt better by putting them closer together and activating more of them in a fire.
Right.
So an advantage to go up from a 0.3 to a 0.25 was strictly pressure.
Strictly a volume or pressure out of the
I have to put a fire pump in if I'm trying to do this 0.3, but I don't need a fire pump if I go 0.25, and I can reduce the pressure, the spacing down to 80 square feet.
Yep.
And we were using the tools. Now that we have K5.6, K8s, ELOs, K17s, all the way up to K25 for area
That's
density.
right. Yeah.
If you can't make those work, you're already in trouble.
You got bigger fish to fry.
You need a pump in a tank anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, we got sidetracked on that
we
one.
always do in this podcast. I never have one where we stay on topic. It's I mean, I won't say it's the bane of my existence, because this is what I absolutely love to do, but it happens all the time. We're in your flow lab now, which is another amazing part of the facility.
So this, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
You being in the podcast business, you understand that you can explain to people distribution patterns, droplet size, and effectiveness of sprinklers.
Yep.
And the difference between a half-inch orifice sprinkler and an ESFR. But I can take you into this facility, and Josh here can show you a half-inch orifice sprinkler.
You do that on your phone?
Yeah, it's all remote control. So we draw pictures of this umbrella.
Yep.
But you can see it's not a true umbrella.
Right.
There's different characteristics in there. But if you'll notice the droplet size in the center core.
Yep.
And using the lights, we can see those drops. Now, they don't look like very big drops. And by the time they get down to the light, you start to see them wave back and forth. They're not penetrating anything.
Right.
So you put a storage fire underneath that. And about a 40-mile-an-hour updraft from a plume going back up to the ceiling. Where are those small drops going to go?
Across the roof.
They're going to go back up to the ceiling, and they're going to wet all the adjacent sprinklers.
Right.
And that's what we call cold solder or skip.
Yes. Yep.
Now, if I show you an ESFR next to it.
Oh, there we go.
Now, you see those droplet size?
Those are penetrating droplets,
Yeah. You look down at the light, where they're just bouncing off of the light. They're not waving around.
Yep.
So that could be very similar amounts of water, but the droplet size, the penetration, and the plume velocity that it's going to penetrate are completely different technologies.
So that's a K56 versus a
ESFR.
Yeah, ESFR. Would that be a 22.4 or 25?
I think that's a 25. 28? It's a K28.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is very low pressure for it, but it's a great way to show the droplet size comparison at the same pressure to a half-inch orifice sprinkler.
Absolutely.
But then, whether you're in insurance, whether you're a designer or a fitter, when you get to see this for the first time side by side, not a lot of people get to see that.
Seeing and actually understanding the flow rates and the flow paths and the water droplet size and the effectiveness of the water droplet size is huge. And I will say, from the fitter side of things, we see it in trade school, but we don't see it all the time in trade school. Some facilities
and you may see
don't
one
have
at
that
a time,
capability.
but very seldom will you see two side by side where you get to compare and go, oh, that light bulb moment.
Right.
So let's talk about an attic sprinkler.
Yeah.
This is the coolest thing ever, because this is the distribution pattern to an attic sprinkler. So where's the fire in an attic?
Along the eaves.
It's the underside of the roof deck.
Yep.
So what the attic sprinkler technology is designed to do is to wash the underside of the roof deck on both sides.
Okay.
It has very little water in between, but it does have water in case the fire is a light fixture or something in the middle. But where the primary fire is coming from the eave or getting up into the roof deck and then climbing the roof.
Now, what is the pressure? Would you happen to know the pressure offhand that's discharging out of that?
I think this is around 35, 40 PSI.
Yeah, we're about 35, and you're getting a spray pattern like that. So you're getting good 20-foot spray.
This is just city water. We didn't turn on the pumps yet.
Yeah, that's a good. Now, if I come to the side here. Yeah, you can see the design of it.
I'd have you step inside, but I like you, so I'm not going to. But in this room, you can go ahead and cut that. In this room, you can see that we have 2 fire hydrants.
Yep.
So how many fire departments can do water flow tests right now, or train their people how to do a static and residual hydrant and a flow hydrant with pitot tubes?
Right.
So with this being recirculated through an 80,000-gallon reservoir, we don't waste a drop of water.
Right.
They can come in here and they can train on doing pitos and have a crew over here doing static and residual.
Yep.
We can do standpipes. We can do pressure reducing valves. We can set up any configuration we want for testing, certification, whatever the client wants to be trained on. We've got
You've got hose monster laying out there right now.
next to a grate nozzle. So
Yep.
he could set off the grate nozzle. Now, we're not going to discharge foam in this room.
Yep.
But this will give you an example of how we discharge foam on the ground.
Right.
You don't get a lot of demos of this
No.
out in So on the other side of the wall,
Yep.
we have a electric fire pump. So
Right.
this is the manifold.
Yep.
The test manifold. So we'll put a team on this side. They'll use the hose monster equipment. They'll do their pedals. They'll do their flows. On the other side of the wall, they'll be measuring RPMs and pressures.
Yep.
So they developed all the test curves and certification curves for the electric fire pump by reversing the teams. So they get the
Sure.
experience on both sides.
You get the full kind of in-field availability in a controlled environment.
And another thing we're really proud of doing here is a lot of times we'll build an environment for a client.
Yep.
So NFPA, as good as it is a standard written on experience and data that's given to NFPA.
Yep.
But it doesn't cover the world of architecture. It doesn't cover all the different configurations. So we get a lot of questions. How does a sprinkler perform with this obstruction? How does it perform with the glass at a 5-degree angle when you only tested vertical? And although we can't modify a certification or an approval, we can videotape.
Right. And you can
pictures
provide
worth
that
1,000
data.
words again.
Yeah. If an AHJ is asking a question
Right.
about a certain application.
Is there a shadow on the other side?
Right.
Does it throw water over the top of something? Well, we can build it. We can video it.
Yep.
Give you that video record and the data that we collect. Then you can use that with the authority having jurisdiction or the insurance company.
Wow.
Because we can't cover the world. I mean, the standards, as good as they are, can't cover everything.
I mean, the thing I say with architects and contractors all the time is I could sprinkle the world. You just got to show me where to put the hangers.
Yeah,
Right.
I love the NFPA, and this is the NFPA slogan. It's a big world. Let's go protect it together. I love that phrase because it is a big world.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
So with this, the students will be. Josh, I think we're done. Thank you. I really
Thank
appreciate
you very much. That was awesome.
The students will be looking at the sprinkler and looking at the discharge so they can see the design characteristics. You can show them the difference of a coin sprinkler or something to an ESFR.
Deflector types. Yep.
Right. And why does it discharge water the way it does?
And I like what guys are doing now with these, with the
Yeah, we have those all over
QR
the facility.
codes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And on the valves as well.
Yep. So again, action, reaction. There's always a link in this facility. So there's a whole bunch of technologies from old style sprinklers, conventionals. We can demo it all.
Yeah. And you've got like the window application set up here as well.
Right.
So do you guys use this room kind of as a trial, or do you guys have another testing facility here?
We got a whole nother
You have
testing
a whole
facility.
other testing facility.
Yes. This is only for educational student learning experience.
Right.
So we have a complete research and development facility.
Awesome. We may not be able to bring the cameras in there.
But we'll walk through.
We'll walk through.
You want to talk about a Disney toy shop. So now we're coming into the fire pump room.
Yep.
And I always tell everyone that every fire pump in the field is this well lit, this
absolutely.
open,
Clean,
and,
drainage,
available for resources, and 20 people to stand around the fire pump.
There's not a drop of water on the floor, just like every pump that's ever installed. No, no moss growing out of the the packing glands. Oh yeah.
So you can see here that the students are graphing the water supply that they're doing. I don't want to take that off, but underneath they have the RPMs, the pressures, and the readings. So they'll develop their curve. They'll develop the required information on this side. Then they'll go on the other side, and they'll be using the hose monsters to do the pitot readings on the flow, and the other team will come in here.
Awesome.
This is one of my favorites. It's a simple thing, but I could take you into the lab, and I could explain an accelerator or a PO or a V all day long to you.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you that the diaphragm is going to move up when the air pressure, and this little filter, it gets clogged, then it doesn't move properly. You want to know how you learn? You hook air and water up to it.
Okay.
If you don't do it in the right sequence, you get wet. And if something gets clogged and you got water coming out, and it's not supposed to be because you're putting air in there, then something's wrong. Now the light bulb goes off. The action reaction goes off because now you see it and go, hey, if I constantly have water coming out of that in the field, that means something's going on up here, that I'm not getting that diaphragm to move down with my, or vice versa. I'm not getting any water and I've taken the air out.
And that hands-on approach is just an extra trigger for them.
Now you can look at it all day long in that riser room, and you get it. You get it. Just a simple thing of action, reaction.
Rate of rise devices.
Rate of rise. They're all dealing with air and water. And so there's nothing better to put a little air and water in.
Spill some water. The best way to learn.
Excuse me. This is the, I call it the air room. Jim calls it something fancy. But partners of ours, General Air. Also the Fireflex.
Now, is this the VacTech?
This is the VacTech. This is the vacuum system. So this one actually, it's a double interlock pre-action valve, changing the monitoring technique that is monitoring a vacuum, -3 psi.
Right.
Not a lot of vacuum. So it's not trying to get to pure vacuum or suck water into the system. But it's not putting oxygen into the system.
And that's the benefit from a corrosion standpoint.
So it's a vacuum pump. So it's taking air out of the system. And it's only -3 psi. So people say, well, aren't you drawing fresh air into the system through leakage?
Right.
And I tell people, if you have leakage at -3 psi, you have bigger issues. It's one thing to hold 30 psi of air in a system. Right. But only at -3, you're almost ambient pressure.
And you guys developed the sprinkler specifically for the vacuum technology.
It has to have a flipper cap. So we call it our XT1 series. And the flipper cap has a T-handle that goes on the wrench bus. And when the sprinkler activates and the spring sends it up, it flips it over automatically. So it can't go up and come straight back down again. Right. If you don't have the flipper cap on either side, the saddle can spring straight up and come right back down on the vacuum and reseal the sprinkler.
So what was the, I won't say what was the fail rate to go that route, but I mean, how many times did it happen for you guys to say this is
that you need a dedicated sprinkler? We had no field experience of it happening, but in the lab we were able to create it. Right. And once you can create it in the lab, you never want it to happen in the field.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Now, again, with this room starts with a riser mount compressor. And it's hooked up to a dry pipe valve. Right. Because if you're going to work on that, you better know the implications of it activating that valve. Right. Or vice versa. And for the riser mount, tank mount, regenerative air dryer, nitrogen system, the VacTech, but you notice the piping system, they're all wired to a valve. Right. All piped to a valve.
Cause and effect.
It's because if I'm going to teach you how to service one of these compressors, you better understand that there's a live valve ready to go if you take the pressure off.
That's right. Yeah. Pretty quick too, effectively.
Let's see, I just need to trip a motion detector in here. There we go.
Well, that was a good effect. opening up into the foam room.
The foam room, special hazards, big technology change because of the PFAS.
Yep.
So you got a lot of fluorine frees coming around, and the confusing part about them, there's two issues. The first issue is that the fluorine frees
Yep.
are not the same as AFFF.
Right.
So the way they flow through this system and the way they go through the proportioner and the viscosity of all the components have to be validated for the type of fluorine-free foam you're going to be using. You can't just take fluorine-free foam and replace it into an AFFF system and say, I have foam. It doesn't work that way.
That's right. Yep.
So all the components have to be tested and certified for that fluorine-free. So we're doing a lot of work with a lot of different foam companies with all these new blends of fluorine-free. So it's not as simple as the AFFF, where sort of a one-stop shop. It was either 1%, 3%, or whatever your concentrate was.
Right.
Now we've got dedicated foams for dedicated hazards.
Yes. And that is going to mess, I think, I won't say mess a lot of people up, but add
complexity to it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have the PFAS issue.
Right.
So we get the phone calls. Okay, I'm going to change my AFFF C6 chain over to a fluorine-free. Now all I have to do is put the new fluid in there. We're like, look, we're not the EPA, we're not your city, we're not your state. You need to check with everyone, because if you've had PFAS in your system in your piping, you need to check if that's still okay or not. We're not the rule keepers on that.
Right.
We'll sell you foam, we'll sell you the complete hardware, but we constantly now get questions. How many times do I have to flush it before all the PFAS is out?
Yeah. That's a pretty standard question, is it not?
I'm like, I don't know. They don't want to know. This is clean agents.
Yep.
So we got the wonderful news from 3M that they're no longer going to be making the Novec.
Is there a mandatory replacement for that as well by the end of next year?
No. They're just going to stop manufacturing it by 2025, I believe, is the date.
Okay.
So now there's a rush to alternate materials, and there are other Novec equivalents out there, and there's a lot of people doing presentations on whether it contains a PFAS, a PFOS, what it contains, and how much of an environmental hazard it is.
Right.
Viking's making a kind of a conscious decision to go over to an oxio system.
Okay.
So nitrogen and argon.
Okay.
Both natural elements.
Yep.
If those get banned, then we just shouldn't breathe.
Well, that's it. That seems to be the way things are going, is that if it's in fire protection, it's dangerous. The bunker gear that we're wearing now, it contains PFAS as well, and that's what the big thing is with my fire department, is they're talking all the PFAS in the bunker gear that we just bought.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I was honored enough to spend some time on Standards Council, and I spent the last 3 years chairing the Standards Council, where there's 320, I believe, over 300 NFPA standards that regulate the fire protection industry.
Right.
Firefighter breathing apparatus equipment,
Yep.
and the way it breathes your jacket. And I'm not a technical expert on it, but I was amazed to find out how many components contain PFAS.
Yeah, pharmaceuticals like makeup and stuff like that as well is the big one, that the makeup contains the PFAS as well.
So it's an issue. One thing I can say in defense of NFPA is they never tell you how to do something. They just say, this is the requirement for temperature and resistance. How it gets solved is usually an industry issue.
Yep.
So they never said, use this material.
Yep.
But we'll see how it all pans out. We got to protect our firefighters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a dangerous job already. There's no need to make it even more dangerous or anything that you can even take home with you.
So you'll see by these discharge that all the detection in the panels are set up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, if you're going to go out there and, I was always afraid of special hazards as a contractor.
Okay.
Because I was told to be afraid. usually by people that just install special hazards. And when you really look at them, and you look at the piping configuration, it's not much different than a double interlock pre-action from the technology standpoint. It's just you got to deal with the pressurized cylinders and piping and valving for it.
Right.
But we've got a lot of automated applications now that are helping our general customers get more involved with this because it's becoming more and more prevalent in computer rooms, data centers, energy storage, those types of applications.
Now, for these, when you're doing demonstrations and stuff like that, you're not dumping any of the chemicals in here. Are you guys just using like a compressed gas in there, compressed air?
For the demo, nothing.
Nothing.
No, we go to the valve trip. If we don't like it, we're going to put something bad in there. And too much danger to have compressed gas in the system. So we try to stay away from that for the demo purpose.
Awesome.
So the tanks are pump generated foam, bladder tank,
yep.
and high expansion foam generators.
See, that's something I've never actually gotten into myself, is high expansion foam generators. I've done a little bit of foam. I've done a little bit of foam systems, stuff like that. Big pain. Man, are they a pain.
The high-X are really cool.
Airport hangers, stuff like that.
When you see it fill a room in 2 minutes.
I like watching the video.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Our big advantage on this one is, excuse me, no foam or no fan.
Right.
A lot of them are fan generated.
Yep.
That increases the weight. Ours is just nozzle. So.
Okay. So you have the foam's injected into here, and it's just aspirated inside the generator itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the nozzles, without the addition of the fan, it's lighter weight. It's about 150 pounds. Goes up in a man lift. A lot easier to get up there than a 500-pound unit. But it uses the Venturi effect in the open grate with the nozzles to break apart the foam.
Now, does it generate foam slower because of that?
This one, if you compared the two, a fan generated protects a little bit bigger area. So this has a little smaller area of application.
Okay.
But it generates the foam to the criteria that, the foam standards require.
Okay.
And again, whether you're talking bladder tank, you got to have a riser station.
Yep.
You got to have your injection system.
And it's all hooked up.
Everything's hooked up. But when you show this injection system and people start to understand the concept to it, then they understand that the viscosity is not the same of the fluid.
Right.
It may not make the same percentage foam over here.
Going from the AFFF to the green foam.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I've been getting a little bit into doing more foam concentrate testing and servicing for stuff like that. And this is where
the magic happens.
That's right. So I did a demo of the VR last year with Rob.
Yeah, Rob Sell.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was one of the developers that came around and kind of set the whole thing up, and it was like a video game. It was like a sprinkler fitter's video game, right?
Well, and you talk about training, you talk about the future of our industry.
Yep.
It's tough to send people for a week-long training somewhere.
Yeah. Well, everybody's so busy right now.
They're busy.
Right.
And what my direction to the training department was, I want you to take the entire industry, and I want you to put it in less than 5-minute segments.
Right.
Because the requirement for training, certification, state licensing, and all the things that are going on in our industry are going to get more severe.
Yeah.
The training of the authority having jurisdiction and the insurance companies is getting more and more difficult for them to obtain and retain the talent.
Right.
A lot of people rotate through the fire departments.
Yep.
And inspection and fire marshal's office is a stepping stone to be a captain or some other part of the organization. So we get a lot of people trained and they rotate out, and you have new people coming in.
Yep.
We need more training.
Right.
So what I want to do is I want modules with credits, with CEUs, and people can come in and Fitter Friday. You come in, you put a set of goggles on, download from the cloud, and today in 5 minutes, you're learning how to reset a drive out.
Right.
And you got to go in and do it.
And you have to manually do it.
You have to do it in this environment. It's not just watching a video. It's not that. You've got to do it in the right sequence.
Yep.
But there will be a day at 2:00 in the morning when you go out to that job site and you're looking at a Viking dry valve. You're going, okay, it's 2:00 in the morning. I can't call anybody. You put my goggles on.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go do it virtually.
Yep.
And then I'm just going to do it in the real world.
Yep.
And just spend 5 minutes. How many times do you read a data sheet? And there's 14 pages to a data sheet.
Yep.
Then you find out you have an accelerator. That's another 6 pages. Now, how does that accelerator relate to the dry valve? And how do I put the two together at 2:00 in the morning?
Right. Yeah.
So here we can kind of walk you through all of the components. And I want the fitters to be trained. I want the designers to have access into training and NFPA.
Yep.
Just take all these subject matters, but they got to be quick.
Yes.
They can't be 6 hours.
Nobody's going to sit in a course for longer than that duration anymore. Like, people want information. It's the YouTube age where I can go online and I can find videos.
They want to know what they need to know when they need to know.
That's right. Yeah,
It's a phrase I use, and I drive the guys crazy with it. But we're going to keep investing in this. We got really smart guys, people. When I say guys, I'm sorry. We have really smart people that have gaming degrees. Yeah. That are programming some of this information, into the system. Yep. So you do get that interactive feeling and not just the clunky. So you're going to look down and see a guy in bibs when you got the headset on with a paint marker and a stick rule in his bibs. I haven't seen anything where you can look at yourself. I don't want to see that.
That's fair, yeah. I know a lot of the fitters out there. You don't want to go that road either, yeah.
But they talk to you while you're doing something, and that interaction again, that action reaction, that, okay, close this valve. Okay, now I know I closed my water supply valve. It is telling you you've done that. Right. But don't start doing that until you close the water supply. Yeah. The next step is to have a little nozzle up above where you just get a little splash of water. That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. We got to put a little smell thing in there now. You're saying that, sprinkler water. Yeah, you got to get that sprinkler experience. So this is just a great environment, and Viking is a little bit of an advantage because we partner with Anvil, Potter, and I'm going to get in trouble for not mentioning all of our partners. But because we have VSN, the distribution, we have partners that are in our system. Right. So we leverage them and say, give us your information as well, because they're interacting with your components when you're interacting with our components. Yep. So they come in and they're helping us with their graphics and their information, and we're embedding it into the systems approach. It's a huge kind of fire protection network. It is. For education. It truly is. Yeah. I mean, I could do a sprinkler all day long, but guess what? It's connected to pipe. It's connected to couplings and fittings and a whole bunch of other stuff. And unless you got the experience, in front of you, you gotta relate it all to the person doing the training. But I'm excited about it. I don't understand any of it. I don't have to, but I've got smart people that do. Now, the only thing that I won't even say it was a problem, but Rob did say it was available. I could download it at home. I was never able to find it. I was going to have my kids reset and dry valves on weekends virtually, but I couldn't figure out how to find it online. Talk to Mr. Lake. Yeah. He's the guy. And we do have customers actually downloading it. So yeah, because my kids have the VR thing. They go on and play. Yeah, I don't know. They just look silly in there. But I would love to be the guy in there trimming out a dry valve. The goggle technology is becoming much more economical. It's like any computer technology. Right. These might be $3,000 goggles, but the ones that you're going to end up using will be $300 goggles. And still great. Right. My kids have a great time with them. They do the same. I won't say the same thing, obviously, than the substantially more expensive ones, but they're adequate. But we have to share more to the next generation of designers. We're losing a lot of legacy people. Yes. In our industry. Yeah. My mentors coming in the business when I first started in the standards world were the Chet Shermers and Rolf Jensen. They're no longer with us, but those guys, I remember their advice to me was my first NFPA committee, sit down and shut up because all you're going to do is prove what you don't know. They said, look around the table. They said, everyone in this table has 30 plus years of experience in the fire sprinkler industry.
Yeah.
And all you're going to do is just prove you don't know what you're talking about. And I tried to listen. I didn't listen well, but
that tend to everybody with sprinkler. I'll say that's one of the big problems I had when I first started the podcast with having people come on, because this is a very proud industry.
mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to come on and be proven wrong. But you can go back, this will be episode 101. And in every single episode, somebody misspeaks, somebody says the wrong terminology. It happens all the time. It's a very kind of flowing conversation. Yeah. You can't be on all the time. And I don't like to edit. So I take the issues. I
love the challenge. Anything I've said, call me. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
You heard him.
Yeah. No worries.
Insert cell number here. Just kidding.
I've handed out my cell phone all over the world. For the entire time that I've traveled. I've done 48 countries.
Wow.
In lecturing. And every time I finish my presentation, I put my cell phone up.
Awesome.
We have to share what we have learned.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. I got to learn a whole bunch through just being in the right place at the right time.
Yep.
I laugh about it in our industry. When I hit my 40 year, they did a little party for me, and I had 72 patents globally that my name was on. And I did a speech, and I said, the funny part about it is I've never had a creative thought. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? I listen. Right. I listen well.
Yeah.
I listen to the fitters. I listen to the designers. I listen to the contractors, customers, insurance, fire authorities. What are the problems? And every one of those are a solution.
Right.
They're a solution to a problem. Not that I was taking a shower and I had, hey, I know what the next K25 ESFR is going to look like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it doesn't occur that way.
Right. So in saying that, you started in a contract in design?
Design training. 1982.
Okay, so design training. Let me just check the time on this, because I think at an hour, plenty of time. At an hour, I got to reset it. Okay. So what did your kind of career trajectory look like? Did you see, when you started in the industry, did you see yourself as the CEO of Viking Sprinkler or a major manufacturer? What were kind of the key things in your life that turned that corner for you?
Oh, I don't want to offend anybody of my past, but my first day of work.
Okay.
So graduated high school, was going to a community college, didn't really understand what I was going to do. I loved engineering. I loved mechanical drawing.
Yep.
I didn't know if I was going to be an architect. I didn't know, but I loved drawing.
Yeah.
My brother worked in a fab shop, of all things.
Okay.
Fabrication shop. So he said, why don't you come out? They're hiring a drafting trainee. You get to draw things.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool. I went from $3.85 an hour to $5.
Done.
I'm swimming in swimming in money now.
Yep.
So I went in my first day of work, the typical design manager, chief engineer, and I'm tracing on vellum.
Yep.
On a green board, backgrounds for a sprinkler designer to draw the sprinkler system on.
Okay.
So I'm doing tracings, and I notice a 20-year vet running blueprints. So I go into the chief engineer and I said, shouldn't I be doing that? Running the blueprints? Shouldn't he be drawing?
Yeah.
Politely told me to shut up, sit down, and continue tracing my background.
I bet it wasn't too polite, was it?
It was. You get scolded your first day. So I went home that night, and my father was a firefighter for 38 years.
Okay.
And a little disappointed that I dropped out of school to go take a drafting trainee job.
Yep.
He said, well, how's your first day? I said, Dad, I'm going to go a long way in this business. He says, why do you say that? And I said, if that's my design manager and that's his attitude,
yeah,
common sense, as you always told me, is 85% of firefighting. I'm going to go a long way in this industry.
Right.
Then I had the desire to go national. I learned very quickly to volunteer. So we used to have this Bay Area Fire Forum. It was California. Bay Area Fire Forum was a group of fire officials that got together to talk about issues in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And I started attending. 18 years old.
Yep.
A kid,
Wow.
you know, and I found out that I could volunteer to be the secretary treasurer.
Okay.
Okay. So now I'm secretary treasurer. Then your next rotation is the first vice chair, and then the vice chair, and then you're the chair.
Yep.
And here I am, 18, 19, 20, you know, now coming into my early 20s, and I'm the chair of the Bay Area Fire Forum. Only by volunteer, not by experience,
Sure.
not by, because I said I'll do the work.
Yep.
And the recognition you got because all the fire authorities were coming in there. Now I'm a designer and I'm taking my plans to them. They know you.
Absolutely.
You're not just another face coming in with another plan because you need a quick favor.
Yeah.
This is someone they say, hey, James, how you doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, thanks for what you did the other day. It was a great speaker or something that you organized. That was a key moment that I found out that the industry will give you more back if you give it something.
Yep.
So volunteering and getting involved with different associations, the SFPE.
Yep.
You know, I don't belong with SFPE. I don't have a degree. And why do I want because there's a network of people in there that you need to know, and they need to know you.
Yeah.
The associations, the NFSA, AFSA, get involved with those, volunteer, be on their board.
Yeah.
The recognition is incredible. So it was all just, I knew I wanted to go national. I didn't know it would go global. But, you know, I went to work for Central. If you've got the time, I'll tell you the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve Meyer.
Yep.
A very, very good friend of mine.
He has been on my list of people to have on.
If you could,
I believe he holds more patents than anybody else in this industry.
It's going to be like interviewing a raging bull on a rodeo, but trying to keep him on track. But
he's one of a good time.
He's one of my best. Steve and George and their father, Bill Meyer.
Yep.
Steve was a salesman.
Okay.
And I tell the story a lot to salespeople. He was the only salesman in the Bay Area that would come back and speak to the designers.
Okay.
Now, I started in 82 and 85. I took over the department.
Okay.
By fortune. The chief engineer started his own company.
Right.
So I walked straight in there and I said, I want to run the department. We had 14 designers at the time.
3 years after starting?
3 years in.
Okay.
You know, no ask, no get.
Yeah, absolutely.
They gave it to me. And but Steve Meyer would come in and talk to the designer. And everyone else wanted to talk to the purchasing agent. Everyone else wanted to talk to the owner, you know, go have lunch or do whatever they do. They didn't know how many decisions were made back in the design office of what you were going to use. So Steve impressed me, the fact that he came back and talked to me. Well, I was helping him with extended coverage ordinary hazard.
Okay.
Back in the late 80s. In fact, late 80s, early 90s. And I was doing calculations for him.
Okay.
Because he had the idea, but he had no idea of K-factor and spacing and what a K11 or a K14 would do.
So Steve Meyer doesn't come from design. He comes from sales. He had these sales ideas.
I'll quote his line. He had a birth certificate. So Bill Meyer came from the Star, bought Central.
Yep.
Had George, Steve, Marilyn, multiple family members working in the company. And Buck Buchanan, an adopted son, was part of that whole group. But Steve was the West Coast sales rep.
Okay.
At the time that I got to know him. Well, I'm doing all these hydraulics for him, and I'm doing all this spacing and, you know, garages and things like that. And he calls me up one day. I don't know that I'm on speakerphone. But Central was a public company.
Yep.
So this was a board of directors meeting.
Oh.
And they had all the engineers around. They tell me this later. They had all the engineers around the outside. They had the board of directors. They had me on speakerphone in the middle of the table. And Steve was very excited. He passed the first extended coverage ordinary hazard sprinkler. It required 7'6" clearance from the deflector to the top of anything stored.
Okay.
And he's Steve is very dynamic and very excited. And I said, who's the idiot who thought that was a good idea? I said, what are you going to do? Park matchboxes? And I think I'm talking to my friend.
2 rows high?
Yeah. I'm talking to my friend. And I hear the fumble of a receiver come off the phone. I'll call you back. And I got a call that night, and he said, we have to have someone technical working for us that understands these rules and what this all means. We thought we
Thought
solved,
you did something.
we solved every Walmart. We solved every, I said, God, you solved nothing with commodity clowns.
Yeah.
And that's why I went to work for Central Sprinkler, moved across the country.
This is still year 3? Or this is late 80s. This is after.
Yeah,
okay.
91, I went to work for Central.
Okay.
And, the same thing, I was a director of technical services, and everyone's questioning, why'd you hire this guy? He didn't have a degree, never went to school.
Yep.
And George Meyer, I remember him in the hall arguing with someone over me. I'm sitting in the room. I just moved to the East Coast. I moved my family to the East Coast. And George said, that kid, because I was 20 something, 28, I think at the time. He says, that kid's forgotten more about sprinklers than you'll ever know. And that was the end. He was the president, CEO of the company. And I felt really good at that point. And I said, I found my home.
Yep.
But the engineering department. So I've ran an engineering or a design department before.
Yep.
And I'm watching what's going on with the engineering department. I'm going, this is just crazy.
So still no degree?
No.
Okay.
So they said, look, if you have opinions about the engineering department, it's yours. So you're now the VP of engineering.
All right.
And now I've got a complete engineering department and a lot of smart people, a lot of degreed engineers. Yeah. And, I'm not saying I do tolerancing or material selection or things like that, but the common sense of how you go through something. But that experience came from volunteering. That experience came from participating in this industry. Then I took over the plant, ran that for quite a while in a Tyco acquisition. They asked me to move up to Rhode Island.
Yep.
I built a new training center up there.
That was your...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I took over for Jerry Pepe, who was the VP of engineering before me. So I built a new training center and a museum.
Yep.
We had Frederick Grinnell's desk.
Yeah. That's cool.
They were closing an office and they said, what are we going to do with this desk? I said, give me $40,000 and I'll build 4 walls and build a museum, because that's where he started, was Providence.
Yeah.
So I'll build a little museum for Frederick Grinnell. They gave me $5 or $6 million, and I built a training center and a museum around that desk.
Wow.
It was really cool.
Around the desk.
I hate when I say
yeah.
The team built this around this, and they had great people up there.
That's awesome. Let me just check that. Yep, we're good still. I just got to check the time.
Yeah, no worries. So with that, a number of years later, working for Tyco, traveling all over the world, I became a senior fellow. A very interesting story.
Okay.
And you'll relate to this because you've asked me 3 times, still no degree. So Tyco at the time had a meeting with me and explained I was a senior vice president of engineering, R&D.
Yeah. And
they had a meeting with me and said, you do know you don't have a degree. Now, this is after 30 years of experience.
Did you say very aware?
I said, it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
So you've hit the end of your runway. And I've heard of glass ceilings. My father taught me not to pay attention to ask and show people what you can do, and then it'll come. So they told me I would be a senior fellow, and that was it. You'll never be a COO or CEO or a president. You're going to be a senior fellow. So they go out of their way to have this meeting with me.
Okay.
And I said, okay. Went home and I told my wife at the time, I said, I think I was promoted or demoted. I don't know. I don't know which one. But it was the first time someone said, I don't have a degree, therefore you are now limited. I didn't let it bother me a whole bunch. I loved the industry. I was lecturing all over the world. And I did it for Tyco for many, many years. I did it for about 10 more years. Mm-hmm. Then I got a magic phone call from Kevin Ortel with Viking. Mm-hmm. He's going to retire. He had a bout with a little bit of an illness that he got over, but decided it was time for him to retire.
Yep.
And he said, I want you to come be CEO. I would have never have left
Right.
if someone didn't tell me that I was at the end of my runway.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those opportunities.
How do you say no?
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't. It was a great honor that Kevin called me, and scared to death. Like every position you take, and every new role that you take with more responsibility. If you're not scared, then you're not living.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're probably not good at what you do if you're not afraid of expanding your role or expanding new applications.
Yep.
But here at Viking, it's just been a great team around me. We've built a solid team.
Yeah, and changed a lot of what I think people would consider your base model for training now. Having a center like this, a location like this, this is now what people have to do. In
my opinion, you will use what you're most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be the person teaching you everything that I can possibly teach you.
Yep.
And if you're more familiar with my dry valve and you order my dry valve because it's $5 difference between the two, then I've done my job.
Right. Now, I don't think people are strictly ordering material based off of price anymore. I think it is
agree with you.
user familiarity. Yeah, I agree.
I call it a partnership.
Yep.
If they know they can make one phone call to someone and get a problem resolved, that's worth 10 times the savings it would be to buy a third party.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have to chase answers for stuff like that, it goes a long way. What other aspects of this facility are we able to film?
I'll show you a couple of areas, and I'll let you turn the camera on here or there. But it's I have in the research and development. And if you want to talk about steroids, I think it was an 800% increase in floor area, equipment, multi-million-dollar expansion into the capabilities of research and development and the efficiency of it. Now,
I mean, we'll see if we're allowed to film in the R&D phase. But your research and development, this is not a, I'll say, UL approved facility, or is this is a UL approved?
Yeah.
So do they come and use your facility to verify your stuff? You still have to go to them.
Under the I believe it's DAP. This is where I'll get the phone call.
Hey, there it is.
It's DOP. I don't know. But UL has a program where you can do certain testing.
Okay.
Like flow distribution testing, as long as the calibrated and they come and check your equipment.
Yep.
And you can do certain testing. I can do certain residential testing here.
Right.
They'll always do a spot check. They can pick whatever they want.
Right.
So they're still going to do some tests. So you're not going to self-certify here to UL.
Sure. And that's probably better.
Exactly.
100% better.
Valve headers. You know, they don't want me to ship a whole bunch of 12-inch valves to them.
They don't?
No.
Oh, it's almost like those guys don't want to.
In the virtual world, it's real easy. I can pick it up with one hand.
I always say that to guys in the field. Like, that 8-inch skid 40 was easy on the computer to design. Why are you guys having a hard time wrestling with it?
Threaded. But like on the valves, I'll set up 10 through 4-inch on the valve header. Then we'll invite the lab in.
Yep.
And they'll witness and do the testing, check the certification, check the flow, make sure everything's okay. They'll witness some of that testing here.
Right.
But it really depends on the lab. There's 28 different agencies around the world that review our products.
Yep.
Most people know about ULFM, LPC, VDS, CCCF in China.
Yep.
Those are the big ones that do a lot of testing. But other ones want to see your test reports. They want, it depends what agency it is. There's Japan, there's Korea, different agencies that do testing. But we can duplicate it all here.
That's awesome. That's and I don't imagine, like you say, I don't imagine it was cheap to get the approvals for all those as well. You probably had to invite them all in here, as well as you still have to, like you say, ship stuff to them as well, right?
Yeah, the majority, the UL is a special program.
Yep.
FM doesn't do a lot of it. They do a little, with the valves, so they may witness here just so they don't have to handle it. But generally, they want to do their own testing. VDS will witness some here, but also they want to do their own testing as well.
Yep. Like you kind of hit it really good earlier. When we were talking about training and what people can do to kind of expand their availability in the industry. And you talked about volunteering.
Yeah.
Right? Just being involved with different associations and stuff like that. And I have the same, I won't say it's a problem, but it kind of is with fitters in the industry, where they think they get their ticket, they get their journeyman, they're past their in Canada CFQ, they become a Red Seal endorsed sprinkler fitter, and they think the education has to stop. And that drives me nuts, because the industry changes every day. For the most part, there's something new going on in this industry all the time.
And I tell people my first 10 years of the industry was applying NFPA 13 as a designer.
Yep.
My next 30 years of the industry was proving what I had learned wrong. Because, you go to work your first day and someone tells you this is why you're 7'6" off a wall. Well, it's because they were told by somebody why they're 7'6" off the wall.
And that's one of the things, like fitters get stuck into that rule mentality,
because they've been told, therefore it's true.
That's right.
Therefore, I remember the 18-inch clearance on commodity, and I wanted to know where it came from.
Right.
And it was pulling teeth to find out, but it was a very, very special test.
There was a test involved with that?
Yeah, back in 1960s.
Okay. With pipe scheduled systems? Back then it would have been, because I think
what they were testing was the fire travel. See, the issue with 18 inches was the sprinkler water wouldn't cover the entire area with the umbrella of a standard spray sprinkler.
Yep.
So they wanted to know, will the fire travel? So I know who did the test. I won't say the name. I know where the test was done. I have the test results.
Right.
They had 4 pallet loads of material that went up to within 18 inches of 4 sprinklers that surrounded the pallet loads.
Right.
And to everyone's surprise, it didn't travel anywhere. It couldn't travel anywhere. It had nowhere to go. It only had 4 pallet loads.
Yep.
But it controlled the fire.
Yep.
Therefore, that's where we inherited 18 inches. Now, that's been that way since 1960s, the 18-inch commodity clearance. New technologies are coming out, and they say 3 foot, and they, different things. Everyone's like, well, they're not as good as a standard spray sprinkler. No, they don't have grandfather. They're not grandfathered into it. They actually have to test. So when we were doing extended coverage ordinary hazard, we had to test commodity clearance.
Okay.
And it's not easy.
Right.
We put standard spray sprinklers in 45 feet of storage, and we put them 12 feet apart.
Okay.
Okay, you'd think they'd do okay at 12 feet because they can go 15.
That's right.
We only put them 12.
Yep.
We put storage up to within 18 inches.
Yep.
It burned 45 feet in 3 minutes.
Oh.
Right in between them. Sprinklers couldn't put water on them for the life of them.
Wow. So does that change the way, obviously that would change the way deflectors are manufactured?
No, it can't. See, a standard spray sprinkler is by rule, has to pass certain distribution tests.
And you can't do that when
you can't change the distribution test and call it a standard spray sprinkler. Now, you can develop a coin sprinkler, combustible concealed, and call it something different, and you don't have to comply with the rules.
Right.
Now you can throw water where you need it, because you don't have handcuffs to a standard spray distribution pattern.
That's why you're able to get attic sprinklers, hallway sprinklers, various.
Because we call them special.
Yeah.
And then the rules go out, and now it's performance.
Right. See, these are all the little things that, like I say, these are the conversations. I think it was Scott Pugsley said it years ago. You know Scott from Seneca? Scott Pugsley?
I know of him. I don't know him that well.
Great guy, but he said one of the best things that he liked about my podcast is it gives people access to the conversations that are having that fitters, some designers, some engineers aren't having, right? So little tidbits of information like that are what I love about the ability to talk to James Golinveaux, talk to Matt Klaus, talk to all these people in the industry, talk to the smartest people, the most influential people in this industry, and kind of bring those opinions and conversations out to everybody. Because I think the more education and the more general fire protection knowledge that's out there is obviously it gets people more interested, right? It's not just lines and circles on a piece of paper, right? It's not just pipe and fittings in a ceiling. It's life safety.
And the standards are a collective group of people, very smart people, that take the best information they have at the time,
right,
and they write standards around it.
Yep.
And then things change.
Yep.
One of the things I did in the early 80s was with Russ Fleming.
Yep.
And I called up Russ and I said, send me the code change documentation for the last 15 years.
Okay.
To NFPA 13.
Okay.
And he said, no one's ever asked me for that. And I said, I know what the code says. I want to know why it says it.
Right.
So I went through every ROP and ROC at the time for 15 years prior to the 1980, I think it was 85 edition.
Yep.
So I went back to 1970. And I got every code change proposal, documentation, and committee response. And then I started to understand why something was written and the way it was written.
Okay.
Then you start understanding some of the limitations to why it was done in the first place. So when you're reading it to a new application of a building like this, we didn't have this in the 1970s.
Right.
Yeah, 40-foot atrium or something like that. You know, we had a little bit of atrium, but not a whole bunch. Well, what were they talking about? Why were they talking about it then? And this is what the rule says, but really it didn't take that into consideration. So I should do something different.
Right.
And that knowledge, it's available. And now it's online.
Yeah.
You don't even have to ask for it. You can go to the NFPA website.
And go back and find almost, I can't remember how far back they go, but I don't think they go back to the first edition, but you can go back a ways.
But it's a wonderful resource to find out why.
Yeah. And NFPA Link is another huge change as far as access to information goes as well. And I think that's going to be a big change once it gets caught on. It took me a year of having the subscription and paying for the subscription before I started utilizing it. But now that I have started utilizing it, it's a game changer. You still need to thumb through the digital version of the book, because if you just use searching, you're not going to understand the context. But I think that's another one of those little changes to the way we do things in this industry that's going to make a big difference. Yeah. Awesome. James, this has been an awesome day here.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been awesome, man. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, the Laying It Down for Camp Bucko fundraiser is still going on. The donations have slowed down, but the hoses have not. This sea can is starting to get filled up. These are the ones I just unloaded from the trailer. Those are the ones that were sitting here since last year. These are all still sitting here from last year. We're looking to get donations rolling in. In addition to those hoses that I just showed you, I still have a picture that I'm going to insert right here of all the fire hoses that are still up in Pickering, Ontario. Thank you to the Toronto Social Housing for donating 95% of these fire hoses, as well as everybody else from Southwestern Ontario and Ontario for donating hoses. But let's get those donations to roll in. The link is posted below. $20 a hose. Let's get some money in and let's support Camp Bucko. Thanks, guys.